We are told that Ambassador Bolton was prepared to do the interview, and we invite him to join us at any time. I want to bring in now Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He's the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. He joins us now live. Senator, thanks so much. I want to play for you what President Trump said this morning.
Well, Jake,
about those 12
first of
Russian
all,
military
Jake,
yeah.
Well, Jake, let me just make clear, I'm not afraid to come on CNN. So even if the White House doesn't want to send someone, I'm happy to be on your show.
We appreciate it, sir. I want to play for you what President Trump said this morning about those 12 Russian military intelligence officials who were indicted. Let's take a listen.
This was during the Obama administration. They were doing whatever it was during the Obama administration. I think the DNC should be ashamed of themselves for allowing themselves to be hacked. They had bad defenses, and they were able to be hacked. But I heard they were trying to hack the Republicans, too. But, and this may be wrong, but they had much stronger defenses.
Now, Senator Warner, obviously the Russians are responsible for Russian actions, but looking at the indictment and everything we know now about the Russian election interference, in retrospect, shouldn't President Obama and his administration have done much more?
Jake, our committee will lay out what the Obama administration and the FBI should have done or shouldn't have done shortly. But the basic facts remain. The reason why we have difficult relations with Russia is not because of the Mueller probe, but because Russia intervened in our elections. They hacked into the Democratic National Committee, hacked into Hillary Clinton's team. They interfered in over 20 states' electoral systems. They used social media in ways that were unprecedented. This was a full-on assault on our democratic system. And matter of fact, as the Intelligence Committee assessment made and our committee reaffirmed, they did it with the intent of helping Trump and hurting Clinton. That's the reason why we have difficult relations with Russia. And I'm stunned that this president will not call out Vladimir Putin or Russia's bad behavior. And frankly, one of the things I'm most worried about is we need to have other Americans in the room. Vladimir Putin is a trained KGB agent. He may come in with maps of Syria or maps of Ukraine. And frankly, I think he'll take advantage of this president, who we know doesn't do much prep work before these meetings. We need other individuals from his administration in the room so we know that at least someone will press the Russians on making sure they don't interfere in future U.S. elections. Matter of fact, this is not just happening with us. I'm meeting tomorrow with parliamentarians from across NATO countries who've also been the victims of Russian intervention to see what we can do in concert to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'd wish we'd have that same kind of attention from the president.
Well, with all due respect, sir, you didn't answer my question, which is, President Obama did not do enough to stop this while it was going on in 2016. I think that seems obvious to anybody reading the indictments or reading the newspaper for the last 2 years. Do you disagree?
I think that the FBI could have done more. As a matter of fact, when the October 7th letter came out where the Obama administration did point out the threat of Russian interference, strangely enough, it was the exact same day that both the Podesta emails were hacked and released, and it was the same day of the famous so-called Bush Hollywood tapes.
President Trump was asked this morning by CBS if he would consider pushing for the extradition of these 12 Russian military intelligence officials accused of hacking and interfering in the election. Take a listen to his response.
I hadn't thought of that, but certainly I'll be asking about it. But again, this was during the Obama administration. They were doing whatever it was during the Obama administration.
So he says he hadn't thought about requesting the extradition of these 12 officials. What do you want President Trump to do when he meets with Vladimir Putin in the building behind me tomorrow?
Listen, I don't think Putin will probably deliver those 12 Russian spies, but I sure as heck think the President of the United States ought to ask that these Russian spies are actually released to the American government for American legal process to continue. They attacked our government. This is, again, let's take the Mueller investigation in full. Over 30 indictments, 5 guilty pleas, And we still have whole questions around obstruction of justice and the various people who are part of the Trump campaign who are now cooperating with the government to see whether there was actually collusion. These are still questions that Mr. Mueller's investigation have to answer. And I just wish the one thing the president would stop doing was stop calling this a witch hunt. This has been a very productive investigation that has put further proof to the facts around the Russian intervention in our elections.
After the indictments were issued, Michael Hayden, President Bush's former CIA director, said to me that the next indictments he anticipates when they come will likely name American citizens. Take a listen.
The more this goes, the richer in detail we get, the more I begin to believe that we're probably going to see a widening circle here of people becoming involved. I would not be surprised if this were not the last indictment we see that doesn't mention an American.
Do you anticipate indictments of American citizens next?
Well, Jake, I'm not sure what Mr. Mueller is going to do next. I do know that we have in the public domain the fact that Russian agents reached out to Mr. Papadopoulos, a Trump campaign official. We know that Russian agents met with Trump's son, his son-in-law, and his then campaign manager to try to offer dirt on Hillary Clinton. We know from the indictments that Mueller put out on Friday that the very day that Mr. Trump called on the Russians to try to hack into the Clinton emails, well, Russian spies actually that day did try to attempt to hack into the Clinton campaign. So I would not be surprised at all if whatever is coming next from Mr. Mueller might end up involving Americans. Let's face it, there are a number of individuals from Trump's former national security advisor, General Flynn, to his deputy campaign manager and others who are cooperating with the government. I don't know what that cooperation involves, but I believe we've not seen the results of all that work yet.
Let me just ask you, do you have any hesitation criticizing President Trump while he's overseas, giving the old adage that politics should stop at the water's edge?
Listen, I am saying to Mr. Trump and to his White House, let's make sure that we put more people in that meeting with Vladimir Putin, a trained KGB agent. We need to make sure that the Americans, and for that matter, the world, gets a straight story of what happens in that meeting. But let's also examine the fact this is a president throughout the last week who's basically treated our allies like adversaries in ways that were, I believe, totally inappropriate, and continues to treat our adversaries, tries to act like they're friends. I don't believe that is in the best interest of making America safer.
The indictment also outlines Russian government hackers targeting political committees and campaigns, as well as voter software and state voter registration systems in 2016. The intelligence community has been unanimous in warning about similar attacks in November's midterm election. The U.S. has imposed sanctions as punishment. Do you think that these sanctions are simply not working? And is the U.S. ready for the midterm elections, ready to have these elections without interference?
Well, Jake, I think there's more to be done, and I'm very proud of our Senate Intelligence Committee, where we've got bipartisan legislation that would actually improve election security. I'm proud of the fact that Congress acted to put out $380 million of additional funds so that states could upgrade their voting machines so there actually is a paper trail. In a normal administration, because elections touch federal, state, and local, there would be someone designated out of the White House on election security to make sure there's better coordination. Because as you've mentioned, even the Trump election or intelligence officials have said Russians will be back. I think it's an embarrassment that this White House has not made election security a top priority and has not put the kind of attention and focus on it that we need. The truth is, I'm not sure we're fully prepared. We had hearings just this past week where we brought in some of the vendors who control, 3 vendors control 90% of all of the IT systems that deal with the voter files. I think we need to do more education at the state and local level. Again, a normal administration, this kind of election security coordination would be done out of the White House. But as Trump's own intelligence officials have indicated there's been no signal from the White House that election security in 2018 should be a priority.
You raised President Trump's behavior at the NATO summit. The NATO Secretary General has said that President Trump has had success in pushing U.S. allies to spend more on defense, which has long been a charge of U.S. presidents. Take a listen to this exchange.
Last year was the biggest increase in defense spending across Europe and Canada in a generation.
Why was that last year?
It's also because of your leadership, because your clear message, and
They won't write that, but
no, I have said it before, but the thing is that it really has. Your message is having an impact.
That's UN Secretary General Stoltenberg crediting President Trump with getting U.S. allies to chip in more. Isn't it fair to say that his strategy here is working?
Well, Jake, clearly, I think other NATO countries should chip in more. That's been a goal of American through Democratic and Republican administrations for decades. But at the end of the day, we'll see if that actually happens. This president has a tendency to make bold statements after meetings, and there may or may not be results afterwards. Let's go back to the president's photo op opportunity with Kim Jong-un. After that meeting, he said, if I remember correctly, he tweeted that Americans can sleep soundly because North Korea is no longer a nuclear threat. Well, we've clearly seen that that declaration was not true in terms of the follow-up meetings and in terms of our own intelligence assessments that North Korea has done virtually nothing to actually denuclearize. So the proof will be in the pudding. Let's see if these European countries actually step up and spend more. I would be pleasantly surprised if that proves to be the case.
All right, Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, thanks so much for your time, as always. Coming up next.